Welcome to Wonderful Stories, a place where imagination comes alive. So let's begin.
Part 1. The architect who designs for breath, not power. Ethan Park never cared about skylines. He cared about breathing, not metaphorically, not in the poetic, tortured artist way magazines liked to write about designers. He meant it literally. The way oxygen moved through a room. The way tension could sit in someone's shoulders and then slowly loosen because a ceiling wasn't pressing down on them. Because sunlight hit at an angle that felt like warmth instead of exposure. Because a chair faced a window instead of a wall. He had once redesigned a hospital waiting room so the seats formed a loose curve instead of rows. Nurses later told him families argued less there. No plaque marked the change. No award followed, but people stayed calmer. That was enough. His projects were small. Community clinics, public schools, libraries squeezed into leftover city lots. Buildings that didn't trend online but were worn smooth by hands, backpacks, tired parents, bored teenagers, elderly neighbors who came just to sit somewhere that didn't feel like an afterthought. So when the email came, it felt like spam that had slipped past a filter. Han Global Development, private invitation. Ethan stared at it for a full 10 seconds before opening it, already expecting a mistake. Han Global didn't hire architects like him. They hired names that appeared in design journals. People who built vertical declarations of wealth. Their towers didn't house communities, they announced dominance. Entire blocks turned into glass and steel statements that said we were here, and we could afford to be. And at the center of it all, Lucas Hahn, billionaire before 35, strategic, ruthless, depending on who you asked. A man who could shut down a negotiation with a single sentence. Business articles called him visionary. Competitors used colder words. Ethan had never met him. Had never expected to. He opened the attachment out of professional reflex. Then blinked. It was a proposal outline. A public cultural center. Multi-generational space. Performance halls. Workshops. Classrooms. Outdoor integration. Community programming. He scrolled. No luxury residences attached. No retail complex anchor. No brand-heavy naming rights splashed across every section. It made no sense. Unless. Ethan leaned back slowly. Unless this wasn't about profit. Which meant there was a story here. And Ethan had always been bad at ignoring stories hidden inside structures. He told himself he would just attend the meeting. Listen, leave, no commitment. Han Global's headquarters rose like a mirrored cliff, reflecting sky so cleanly it felt unreal. Inside, everything echoed, footsteps, elevator chimes, voices too careful to be loud. Ethan arrived in a charcoal coat that had seen better winters, portfolio tucked under his arm. Reception directed him upstairs with professional politeness that didn't quite hide surprise. The boardroom doors opened. Glass walls. A table long enough to seat a small conference. Executives in tailored suits, expressions calibrated. And at the head, Lucas Hahn. He wasn't imposing in size. He didn't need to be. His presence carried the kind of quiet control that bent rooms around it. Dark suit, open collar, posture relaxed like someone who never worried about outcomes because he engineered them. Lucas looked up. Their eyes met. It lasted a second too long. Not familiarity, not hostility, recognition of a different kind of opponent. Lucas spoke first, voice even. Ethan Park, your clinic renovation in Busan reduced patient turnover by 30%. Ethan hadn't known anyone track that. People stay where they feel safe. A faint flicker passed through Lucas's expression. Not disagreement, assessment. We're developing a cultural center, Lucas said, gesturing to the screen behind him. I saw, Ethan replied, finally sitting. Which part of this makes money? A few executives shifted. Lucas didn't. Not every structure is built for profit. Ethan studied him. You build towers that erase neighborhoods. And you design rooms that barely appear on maps. It wasn't an insult. It was an observation. Ethan leaned forward. Then why me? Lucas held his gaze. Because this project can't feel like one of ours. Silence settled. For the first time since entering, Ethan felt something unexpected under the skepticism. Curiosity. Because powerful men didn't fund buildings like this without reason. And somewhere beneath the glass, steel, and control, something had shifted. Ethan didn't know yet whether that shift would build something real, or break everything in the process. But he knew one thing. He wasn't walking away. Part 2, glass, steel, and the moment two forces meet. The boardroom felt less like a workspace and more like a pressure chamber. Ethan noticed it the moment the doors sealed shut behind him. Glass on three sides. The city stretched below like a grid of decisions already made. Nothing soft in the room, not the lighting, not the chairs, not the people. This was a place where compromises went to die. Lucas Hahn remained seated at the head of the table, fingers loosely laced, posture easy in a way that suggested control so complete he didn't need to display it. Ethan had met powerful donors before. University trustees, hospital boards, city officials who liked to remind architects who held the purse strings. Lucas didn't posture like them. He observed. Like Ethan was a variable he hadn't solved yet. A screen lit up behind Lucas, displaying early concept massing, a sweeping structure of glass, layered terraces, open plaza space. It needs to be iconic, Lucas said. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He stood, walking closer to the screen instead. The building rose like a sculptural gesture, bold, photogenic, undeniably impressive. It was also wrong. Iconic, Ethan repeated. For who? A faint tightening passed through the executive's expressions, like a shift in air pressure. Lucas tilted his head. Visibility brings funding. Funding sustains programming. That's economics, Ethan said. Not architecture. A murmur almost formed, then died under Lucas's silence. Ethan turned back to the screen, studying the open plaza. This entrance is exposed to the western sun. Summer afternoons will make it unusable. The atrium ceiling height amplifies noise, performances will bleed into classrooms. In this glass ratio, he glanced over his shoulder. Energy costs alone contradict the community sustainability messaging. No one spoke. Lucas's eyes sharpened, not offended. Interested. You reviewed quickly, Lucas said. I designed for use, not renderings. Something like approval flickered, gone just as fast. Lucas stood then, moving toward the screen. He didn't crowd Ethan, but the space between them shortened in a way that shifted the room's center of gravity. What would you change? Lucas asked. Not defend, not justify, change. Ethan hesitated. This was the moment most architects failed. They either softened their critique to stay employable or attacked to prove artistic ego. Ethan did neither. I'd start by listening to the people who live around the site, he said. Where they walk, when they gather, what they avoid. A building like this shouldn't land on a neighborhood. It should grow from it. An executive finally spoke. Community consultations slow development timelines. Ethan didn't look at him. So does designing a space no one uses. Silence again. Lucas studied him like someone watching an unexpected move in chess. You don't seem impressed by scale, Lucas said. I'm impressed by impact. Their eyes locked again. There it was, the thing neither had named yet. Not attraction, not yet. Respect sharpened into tension. Lucas tapped the remote. The screen shifted to zoning overlays. This land parcel, he said, is under redevelopment authorization. Ethan stepped closer, then stilled. Highlighted boundaries overlapped residential blocks. Small buildings, tight streets, a school marker, local shops. His jaw tightened. You're displacing people. Relocation compensation is included, Lucas replied evenly. That's not community, Ethan said quietly. The room cooled. Lucas held his gaze. Urban growth requires trade-offs. Ethan closed his portfolio with deliberate calm. I don't design trade-offs. I design places people can exist in without feeling like collateral. One executive exhaled sharply. Then perhaps you're not a fit. Stay, Lucas said. The word cut clean across the room. Ethan paused, halfway to standing. Lucas didn't raise his voice. Fix it. The executives turned toward him, startled. You want to keep the housing? One asked. I want the architect I hired to solve the problem, Lucas said. Not to Ethan. About him, like a decision already made. Ethan slowly sat back down. You're asking for a redesign of the development model, he said. I'm asking if your principles hold under pressure. Their gazes held, challenge accepted, without either saying it. Because this wasn't just a project anymore. It was a test, of systems, of power, of whether two men built in completely different worlds could create something neither had managed alone. And beneath the glass, the city, the watching executives. Something had shifted again. The collision hadn't destroyed anything. Not yet, but it had changed the trajectory. Part 3, the project that wasn't what it seemed. Ethan didn't go back to his studio that night. He took the zoning files home. That alone should have warned him. Architects learned early how to compartmentalize. You left work at work or it crawled into your sleep and rearranged your insides. But long after midnight, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, laptop open, city planning maps layered across his screen like translucent scars. Parcel boundaries, redevelopment classifications, density allowances. He zoomed in, then in again. His pulse slowed, the way it did when something felt structurally wrong. The cultural center's footprint overlapped a transitional redevelopment zone. A term that looked clean, harmless, until you translated it. Low-income residential blocks, small businesses, long-term tenants with limited legal leverage. The kind of neighborhood cities called underutilized when they meant not profitable enough yet. Ethan leaned back, staring at the glowing map. The building wasn't just being placed near a community. It was replacing one. The next morning, the boardroom felt colder. Lucas entered last, coffee in hand, expression unreadable. Ethan didn't wait for presentations. You didn't mention displacement, he said, placing printed maps on the table. Executives exchanged looks. Lucas remained still. It's part of the redevelopment agreement, someone said carefully. Ethan didn't look at them. His eyes stayed on Lucas. How many families? Lucas's voice was calm. 78 residential units, 12 small businesses. Ethan inhaled slowly. And you call this a community center? Relocation compensation exceeds city minimums, an executive added. Ethan's jaw tightened. You can't compensate someone out of belonging. Lucas's gaze didn't waver. Urban change always affects someone. Yes, Ethan said quietly. Usually the people with the least power to fight it. The air shifted, not loud, but undeniable. Lucas leaned back slightly. What's your alternative? Integrate the existing housing. Reduce the footprint. Vertical layering instead of horizontal expansion. Shared infrastructure, utilities, green space, programming that includes current residents. That cuts rentable event space, an executive said. It increases actual community use, Ethan replied. Lucas watched him like he was seeing something new. Your proposal complicates financing, Lucas said. It complicates conscience, Ethan corrected. Silence dropped heavy. Ethan closed his folder. I won't design a building that starts by erasing the people it claims to serve. He stood. It wasn't dramatic. No speech, no slammed chair, just a boundary. Lucas spoke. Stay. Ethan froze, back still to the table. You said you design for impact, Lucas continued. So do it. Ethan turned. I can't fix a decision already made. Lucas's voice lowered, not softer, but more direct. Then change the decision. A ripple of protest moved through the board. Lucas. He didn't look at them. How long to redesign the model? He asked Ethan. Ethan hesitated. 10 days for conceptual restructuring. Longer for cost realignment. Lucas nodded once. You have 10 days. An executive repeated. Community integration studies alone. Then we work, Lucas said. The room went still. Ethan searched his face, looking for performance. PR strategy. Optics. He found none. Just resolve. You're serious, Ethan said. Lucas met his eyes. Are you? Challenge again. But this time, it wasn't about architecture. It was about whether either of them was willing to bend something larger than ego. Ethan slowly sat back down. Fine, he said, but I need access to demographic data, utility grids, historical occupancy records. You'll have it, Lucas said. A quiet current passed between them. Not agreement, alignment, fragile, unfamiliar, real. As the meeting shifted into logistics, Ethan felt something he hadn't expected when he walked in. Not hope, not trust, but the beginning of a question. What happens when someone with power doesn't immediately choose the easiest outcome? Across the table, Lucas watched Ethan sketch over zoning maps with sharp, decisive lines. For the first time, the project felt less like an asset and more like a responsibility. Neither of them noticed the assistant slip into the hallway outside, already dialing a number. Daniel, she said when the call connected. They're changing the plan. You might want to come in sooner. Inside the boardroom, two men worked to rebuild a system. Unaware someone from the past was already walking back in. Part 4. The past walks in without knocking. The next design session begins like a fragile truce. Tracing paper layers the table. Zoning maps. Structural grids. Ethan has already redrawn the massing model twice, carving away square footage to preserve housing lines, reworking circulation so the building doesn't loom over the street like an occupying force. Lucas watches without interrupting. He's not hovering, not directing, observing. Ethan can feel it, the focus, steady and analytical, but threaded with something new. Curiosity, maybe, or recalibration. Lucas Hahn isn't used to designing with limits. Yet he hasn't argued a single preservation adjustment. That unsettles Ethan more than resistance would have. A knock doesn't come. The door opens anyway. Sorry I'm late. The voice hits before the face. Ethan's hand stops mid-sketch. Lucas looks up. A man steps in like he belongs. Charcoal suit, perfect posture, practiced smile. The kind that plays well in interviews and awards ceremonies. Daniel Cho, award-winning architect. Media favorite, Ethan's ex. The air leaves Ethan's lungs so quietly no one notices. Daniel's gaze lands on him and doesn't flicker with surprise. Of course not. He knew. Ethan, Daniel says, warm as memory, smooth as damage. Lucas's eyes move between them. You know each other, he says. Daniel laughs lightly. We go way back. Ethan forces his voice to work. What are you doing here? Lucas invited me to consult, Daniel replies, setting a sleek portfolio on the table. Large-scale cultural spaces are kind of my thing. Ethan looks at Lucas. Lucas's expression shifts almost imperceptibly, calculation adjusting to new data. I wasn't aware of a conflict, Lucas says. Daniel smiles. Professional history doesn't have to be personal. It's a lie wrapped in charm. Ethan remembers late nights in a different studio, years ago. Shared drafts, shared dreams. Daniel's voice saying, we build better together. Then the international offer. The sudden distance. The project Ethan had confided in him about appearing in a design journal 6 months later, under Daniel's name. You left out part of that history, Ethan says quietly. Daniel meets his eyes, smile thinning at the edges. We were young. Lucas hears it, the tension under the politeness. He doesn't ask questions. Yet, Daniel opens his portfolio, sliding glossy renderings onto the table. Sweeping curves. Dramatic atriums. The kind of architecture that photographs beautifully and ages badly. These forms would re-establish the skyline dialogue, Daniel says, gesturing. In relocating the residential footprint creates a grand civic plaza. Ethan stares at the image. The preserved housing blocks he fought for are gone. Erased in a single gesture. That's exactly what we're not doing, Ethan says. Daniel tilts his head. You're still on the ethical purity track. Lucas's gaze sharpens. I'm on the community track, Ethan replies. Daniel chuckles. That doesn't win bids. Lucas speaks, voice calm. This bid is already won. Silence snaps tight. Daniel recovers smoothly. Then let's make it memorable. Ethan's control fractures just slightly. Memorable for who? He asks. Daniel shrugs. Cities evolve. Sentimentality stalls progress. Lucas watches Ethan's jaw tighten. He's seen that expression before, in negotiation rooms when someone is pushed past professional into personal territory. Daniel doesn't notice, or doesn't care. After the meeting adjourns, Ethan steps into the hallway, air sharp in his lungs. Footsteps follow. Still intense, Daniel says lightly. Ethan turns. You knew I was on this project. I saw the name on internal docs, Daniel admits. Small world. You stole my concept, Ethan says, voice low. The modular clinic model. The daylight. Study. Daniel sighs. We discussed ideas. That's collaboration. It was trust. Daniel's smile fades. You really think this industry runs on trust? Lucas stands at the far end of the hallway, unnoticed. Listening. Maybe that's why you win, Ethan says. And why your buildings feel empty. Daniel's eyes harden. You think integrity pays your bills? Ethan doesn't answer, because some part of him still wonders. Daniel walks off, confidence restored like armor. Lucas remains where he is, processing. He built an empire stepping on hesitation. On softer men, on idealists who didn't move fast enough. But seeing that strategy aimed at Ethan feels different, feels wrong in a way Prophet never did. Inside the conference room, Daniel's glossy renderings sit under the lights. Impressive, cold, and suddenly, Lucas finds himself hoping the quiet architect who challenges him doesn't decide to walk away. Because this project just stopped being theoretical. Now, it's personal. Part 5, Old Wounds, New Battlefield. Daniel integrates himself into the project with alarming ease. By the third meeting, he's leaning back in his chair like he's been there from the beginning. He knows how to perform for rooms like this, when to nod at financial forecasts, when to ask visionary-sounding questions that don't threaten timelines, when to flatter without seeming like he is. The board responds exactly the way Ethan knew they would. They light up around him. Because Daniel speaks their language. Cultural centers can anchor mixed-use value growth, Daniel says, flipping to a slide of foot traffic projections. With the right visual impact, the surrounding district appreciates within 5 years. One executive smiles. Now that's scalability. Ethan doesn't look up from his sketches. Lucas does. Daniel's next slide replaces Ethan's integrated housing plan with a sleek plaza rendering again, open, photogenic, expensive looking. Ethan sets his pencil down. That design displaces 78 households, he says. Daniel doesn't miss a beat. It relocates them to higher quality units. Further away from their schools, jobs, transit networks, Ethan replies. Community isn't just square footage. Daniel gives a soft, almost pitying laugh. You always did struggle with big picture thinking. The insult lands precisely where Daniel intends. Ethan's jaw tightens. Lucas notices. He's watched hostile takeovers unfold across boardroom tables, but this is different. This isn't strategy. It's personal history weaponized. Daniel, Lucas says evenly, the preservation model remains active. Daniel glances at him, smile polished. Of course, I'm just offering options. After the meeting, the hallway air feels electrically charged. Daniel catches Ethan before the elevator. You could have gone further, Daniel says quietly. Bigger firms, bigger projects. Instead, you're still designing feel-good spaces for people who can't afford to matter. Ethan exhales through his nose. Still measuring worth in headlines. Visibility is survival, Daniel replies. You think quiet integrity changes the industry. It changes lives. Daniel shrugs. Lives don't fund legacies. Lucas hears that. He had once believed it. Built his career on it. Daniel continues, voice lower. You know why I got ahead. I wasn't afraid to use what I had. Other people's ideas, Ethan asks. Daniel smiles without warmth. Opportunities. Lucas steps forward then, presence altering the hallway like a shift in gravity. Daniel, he says, tone neutral but edged, I'd like to review your structural feasibility notes on the atrium span. Daniel blinks, surprised at the technical turn. I'll have my team send. I'd prefer yours, Lucas says. A pause. Daniel nods, expression tightening just a fraction. Of course. He leaves. Ethan exhales, tension slipping into exhaustion. You didn't have to do that, he says. Lucas studies him. He speaks well. He always did. Lucas's gaze sharpens, but he doesn't listen. Ethan looks at him, surprised. Lucas continues, quieter. You do. Something unspoken passes between them, recognition of different strengths, different costs. Later that night, Lucas sits alone in his office, lights low, city spread below like circuitry. He pulls up archived project files. Daniel Cho, a cultural complex from years ago. Failed post-construction review, structural stress miscalculations, budget overrun blamed on, unexpected variables. Lucas scrolls further. Internal memos. A junior architect raised concerns about load distribution early in the design phase. Warnings dismissed. Name, Ethan Park. Lucas leans back slowly. He remembers the meeting where he approved emergency funds to salvage that project. Remembered being told the junior staffer was overly cautious. He had sided with the senior designer. With Daniel, he hadn't known, but his decision helped bury Ethan's credibility. A quiet, unfamiliar feeling settles in his chest. Not anger, not strategy, guilt, because this isn't just business history. It's damage with a face now. And tomorrow, he has to decide something he rarely allows emotion to influence. Who he trusts to build something that's supposed to mean more than profit. Part 6. The truth buried in old blueprints. Lucas doesn't sleep. The city moves in slow rivers of light outside his office windows while archived files glow across his screen. He reads everything: internal emails, consultant notes, cost variance reports from the failed cultural complex he funded years ago. He remembers the public story. Ambitious design, unexpected engineering complications, budget overflow blamed on material delays. The press cycle moved on in 2 weeks. He'd moved on faster. That's what survival at his level required. But now he reads the internal correspondence with different eyes. One email thread stands out. From Ethan Park, junior architect. Subject: structural load concerns, atrium span. Attached are stress simulations, suggested reinforcement strategies, notes about long-term material fatigue if ignored. Lucas opens the response. From Daniel Cho. We've reviewed. Concerns noted but unnecessary. We can't keep redesigning every time a junior analyst runs worst-case scenarios. Lucas exhales slowly. Further down, another message. From Project Management. Proceeding with Daniel Cho's revised plan to maintain timeline. Lucas remembers signing off on the emergency funding months later when issues surfaced during construction. He had called it an unfortunate but manageable oversight. Now he sees what it really was. A warning buried because it came from someone without influence. Because someone louder overrode someone right. Lucas leans back, fingers steepled under his chin. He built an empire on decisiveness, trusting leaders who projected certainty. Cutting hesitation before it slowed momentum. Daniel had looked like certainty. Ethan had looked like caution. Lucas had rewarded the wrong one. For years, it hadn't mattered. Until now. Until the quiet architect with worn sketchbooks and stubborn principles stood in his boardroom, arguing for families Lucas's development model would normally erase without pause. Lucas scrolls further. A final internal note from that project. Junior architect contract not renewed. Team restructuring. No explanation. No appeal. Just a career quietly diverted. Lucas closes the file. The weight in his chest settles into clarity. This isn't just professional rivalry. Daniel didn't just outmaneuver Ethan emotionally. He buried him systemically. And Lucas helped. The next morning, the board meeting begins like any other. Quarterly forecasts, risk projections, polished language. Daniel sits near the center, confident as ever. Ethan focuses on revised housing integration models at the far end of the table, posture contained, presence smaller than his impact. Lucas listens, then interrupts. Daniel, he says, voice level. We're terminating your consultancy contract effective immediately. Silence detonates. Daniel blinks. I'm sorry. Lucas slides a folder across the table. I reviewed your previous structural oversight record, Lucas says. There's a pattern of dismissing risk analysis raised by junior staff. Daniel's expression shifts from confusion to offense. Every major project has disputes. This firm does not ignore documented safety concerns, Lucas continues. Especially when raised by qualified architects. A beat. Daniel realizes. His eyes flick toward Ethan. This is about him. Daniel asks, incredulous. You're choosing an unproven designer over. I'm choosing integrity, Lucas says. The board stirs, alarmed. Lucas, Daniel brings brand recognition. He brings liability, Lucas replies. Daniel pushes back his chair, controlled anger replacing charm. You're making a mistake. Lucas meets his gaze calmly. That's possible, but it will be my mistake, not one built on someone else's silence. Daniel stands. You think idealism builds cities? Lucas doesn't blink. We're about to find out. Daniel leaves without another word, the door closing harder than necessary. The room remains frozen. Ethan hasn't moved. He looks at Lucas like he's trying to solve an equation that shouldn't balance. You didn't have to do that, Ethan says finally. Lucas's gaze holds his. Yes, he says quietly. I did, because this is the first time in years a decision has cost him something immediate, reputation cushioning, board comfort, predictable alliances. And for the first time, he doesn't resent the cost. Across the table, Ethan slowly nods, something shifting behind his guarded expression. Not trust yet, but the recognition that maybe, just maybe, the man who builds empires is trying to learn how to build something else. Part 7, the shift begins after midnight. The board gives them 10 days. Daytime becomes politics, budget calls, legal adjustments, city planning negotiations. Night becomes the real work. The Han Global Design Studio after midnight feels like a different building. The sharp corporate energy dissolves into quiet pools of lamplight. The city beyond the glass walls turns into scattered constellations, traffic noise reduced to a distant hum. Ethan spreads tracing paper across the central table, sleeves rolled, pencil moving fast. Not frantic, focused, like someone translating something fragile before it disappears. Lucas tells himself he's there to review feasibility. He hasn't left in 3 nights. Your housing integration adds 14% to structural cost, he says, standing across from Ethan. It reduces long-term social displacement cost, Ethan replies without looking up. That's not a line item investors see. It's a line item people live. Lucas watches his hands, graphite smudged along his fingers, movements precise without hesitation. Ethan draws like he trusts space to answer if he listens long enough. Lucas is used to control through force. Ethan controls through attention. It unsettles him. Show me the circulation change again, Lucas says. Ethan slides a sheet forward. Main public entry shifts east. Keeps existing street flow intact. Residents don't feel like they're walking into someone else's building. Lucas studies the lines. You think about feelings a lot for someone so analytical. Ethan shrugs faintly. Feelings are data. People just pretend they aren't. Lucas almost smiles. The clock hits 1:17 a.m. Why do you do this? Lucas asks suddenly. Ethan pauses, pencil hovering. Do what? Fight this hard for strangers. A long beat. Ethan sits back, considering. When I was a kid, my family moved 3 times in 5 years, he says quietly. Every place felt temporary. Walls you couldn't lean on. Rooms you didn't get attached to. Lucas listens, not interrupting. So I design places that tell people they're allowed to stay, Ethan finishes. Something shifts in Lucas's chest, small, but seismic. He built his life on mobility. Expansion. Forward motion at all costs. Ethan builds anchors. You're staring, Ethan says without looking up. Lucas doesn't deny it. You fight for things no one sees. Ethan's mouth curves just slightly. That's what makes them worth fighting for. Silence settles again, softer now. Outside, a light rain begins, streaking the glass. Reflections blur. The city looks less sharp, more human. Lucas moves closer to the table, shoulder nearly brushing Ethan's as they both lean over the plans. The proximity shouldn't matter. It does. He notices the faint crease between Ethan's brows when he concentrates. The way he taps the pencil twice before committing to a line. Lucas clears his throat. We'll need to rework the funding model to justify lower commercial return. Ethan nods. Community partnerships, local arts grants, shared programming revenue. You came prepared. I assumed you'd push back. Lucas considers that. I usually do. Ethan finally looks at him. Their faces are closer than either realized. Why aren't you? Ethan asks. Lucas doesn't answer immediately. Because the truth isn't strategic. Because somewhere between archived guilt and midnight lamplight, something has shifted inside him, a recalibration he doesn't fully understand. I'm tired of winning the wrong way, he says quietly. Ethan studies him, searching for performance. Finds none. Just honesty, unpracticed. The air changes. Not dramatic, not charged, but warmer. Ethan slides another sheet toward him. Help me with the upper terrace load calculations. Lucas steps fully into the light beside him. They work in silence for a while, shoulders almost touching, pencils and numbers and shared focus building something neither can name yet. Outside, the rain keeps falling. Inside, a building begins to breathe, and neither of them notices the security notification quietly logging an after-hours server access from a remote terminal. Part 8. The Sabotage. The email hits at 6:12 a.m. Lucas reads it before his second sip of coffee. Subject: urgent, confidential file breach. Attached: screenshots, file names, timestamps, the redesigned cultural center plans, Ethan's integrated housing model, structural layering approach, community circulation strategy, have appeared in a competitor's internal proposal deck. Not public, not yet, but close enough. By 8 a.m., the boardroom is no longer a pressure chamber. It's a courtroom. Executives talk over each other, voices sharp. This redesign weakened our IP containment. External collaboration increased risk. We bring in an outsider who openly challenged the company and now this happens. Ethan stands near the far end of the table, still, hands loosely clasped. He hasn't defended himself once. Lucas watches him, pale, controlled, but not surprised. You had motive, one executive says flatly. You disagreed with the project's foundation from day one. Ethan's jaw tightens, but his voice stays even. If I wanted to destroy this project, I would have walked away. Or you stay and sabotage from inside. Silence falls like a verdict waiting to be spoken. Lucas turns his chair slightly. Faces Ethan directly. Did you do it? He asks. Not loud, not accusatory, just a question that matters. Ethan meets his eyes without flinching. No, no defense speech, no outrage, just truth, offered without performance. Lucas nods once. Then we find who did. The board stares at him. That's it, someone demands. No internal suspension, no access freeze. Lucas's voice doesn't rise. Security audits all accounts, but Ethan stays. You're basing that on what? Lucas doesn't look away from Ethan. Judgment. The room bristles, but no one challenges him further. Because this is the voice Lucas uses when negotiations end. Meeting adjourned. Ethan doesn't move right away. Thank you, he says quietly once they're alone. Lucas shakes his head. Don't thank me yet. You didn't hesitate. I did, Lucas says. Just not long. Ethan studies him, something fragile behind his composure. You barely know me. Lucas considers that. I know how you fight, he says. People who sabotage don't fight that hard to build. Something in Ethan's shoulders loosens, barely. Then tightens again. Whoever did this knew the server structure, he says. Internal or former consultant. Lucas thinks of Daniel. Doesn't say the name yet. I'll have IT pull access logs, Lucas replies. By afternoon, the story mutates. A journalist calls. Then another. A rumor surfaces online. Han Global's community project may be performative. Internal conflict reported. The leak didn't just target designs. It targeted credibility. Ethan sees the headlines from his phone in the studio, breath thinning. This is what happens, he murmurs. Lucas hears it. What does? When you try to do something differently, Ethan says. The system pushes back. Lucas has spent his life being the push. Now he's on the other side. And it's messier than he expected. Security footage arrives at 7:42 p.m. Lucas watches alone in his office. Timestamp. 2 nights ago. After midnight, a man at a terminal in a restricted wing. Badge scan delayed in the system because consultancy termination hadn't processed. Daniel Cho. Lucas exhales slowly. Of course, not just ego. Retaliation. Daniel didn't just want the project. He wanted Ethan to lose it. Lucas leans back, eyes closing briefly. He built an empire on anticipating threats. He should have seen this one sooner. That night, Ethan doesn't come to the studio. Lucas notices, doesn't comment, but at 11:06 p.m., he finds himself in the back seat of his car, city lights sliding past, heading toward an address pulled from HR files. Because sabotage is business, but silence is personal, and Lucas has lost enough people to it already. Part 9, The Silence After the Blast. Daniel doesn't wait. By morning, the story detonates. Headline: Whistleblower architect claims Han Global Cultural Center is greenwashing scheme. Daniel's interview is polished, measured, devastating. He never raises his voice. Never sounds bitter. He frames himself as reluctant but ethical, concerned about community displacement, corporate manipulation, image-driven philanthropy. He names no sources, but he names Ethan. Some consultants, Daniel says on camera, chose to stay involved despite knowing the project's ethical compromises. Online interpretation does the rest. Sellout, corporate puppet, performative ethics. The internet doesn't care about nuance. It cares about narrative, and Daniel has always known how to write one. Ethan turns his phone off by noon. Doesn't answer emails. Doesn't go to the studio. Lucas notices before anyone tells him. He doesn't call, because he knows what retreat looks like. He's done it differently. Into work, into control, but he recognizes the instinct to disappear when something hits too close to old wounds. By evening, the city is gray with rain when Lucas stands outside a modest apartment building across town. No assistant, no driver waiting visibly, just him. He hesitates only once before knocking. Footsteps inside, slow. The door opens. Ethan looks smaller, not physically, but like something inside him folded inward. Eyes tired, hair unkempt, no practiced calm, just exhaustion. I figured you'd be busy managing damage, Ethan says quietly. I am, Lucas replies. This is part of it. Ethan lets him in. The apartment is neat, warm in a way Lucas's penthouse never is. Books stacked in uneven towers. Sketches pinned to a corkboard. A half-built model on the kitchen table. Evidence of a life built in fragments of care. I should have seen it coming, Ethan says, leaning against the counter. Daniel always plays long games. Lucas studies him. This isn't on you. Ethan gives a humorless laugh. He's using my old files. My old trust. I handed him ammunition years ago. You loved him, Lucas says simply. Ethan goes still. That's not negligence, Lucas continues. That's human. Ethan's voice lowers. This industry doesn't forgive human. Lucas exhales slowly. I built my career by not being human, he says. By choosing outcomes over people. It nearly turned me into someone I didn't respect. Ethan looks up, surprised by the admission. Lucas steps closer, but not into his space. You didn't fail, he says. The system did, and people like Daniel learned how to bend it. Silence stretches. Rain taps softly at the windows. I knew staying on this project would cost me, Ethan says. I just didn't think it would cost you too. Lucas doesn't hesitate. I don't care about the building right now. Ethan blinks. Lucas holds his gaze, voice steady in a way that feels more dangerous than any boardroom decision. I care about you staying. The words settle between them, heavier than strategy, lighter than confession. Ethan swallows. Why? He asks. Lucas could deflect, could make it about talent, about principle, about optics. He doesn't, because somewhere between arguing about sunlight angles and watching you fight for strangers, he says quietly, I stopped seeing this as just a project. Ethan's breath catches, but he doesn't look away. Outside, the rain keeps falling. Inside, the silence changes shape, not empty now, but full of something unnamed, waiting. Lucas doesn't step closer, doesn't touch him, just stays. And for the first time since the headlines broke, Ethan doesn't feel like he's standing alone in the blast radius. Part 10. What lasts when everything else tries to fall apart? The injunction arrives mid-ceremony. It should have been a simple day. Groundbreaking stage, Community leaders. Kids holding hand-painted signs that read our center. Cameras flashing. Speeches about shared futures. Ethan stands beside Lucas, suit unfamiliar on his shoulders, heart too loud in his ears. Public attention always feels like standing under direct sun, nowhere to hide. Lucas leans slightly closer. You okay? Ethan nods. Just not used to my work being this visible. It deserves to be, Lucas says quietly. Then his phone starts vibrating. Once, twice, 5 times. He steps aside, answers. His legal team's voice is tight. Fast. Emergency injunction. Intellectual property theft claim. Filed by Daniel Cho. Core design elements allegedly derived from concepts shared years ago. Immediate halt request on construction. Lucas closes his eyes briefly. Of course, when he turns back, Ethan already knows. He wants to stop the project, Ethan says, voice hollow. If funding freezes, community approval collapses. Did he have access to your old concepts? Lucas asks. Ethan hesitates, then nods. Yes, trust, shared files, unfinished dreams from another life. Backstage, noise fades under tension. This is my fault, Ethan says, hand in his hair. If I hadn't. No, Lucas says, firm, unmovable. You trusted someone you loved. That's not a crime. It ruined my career once, Ethan whispers. Now it's ruining yours. Lucas steps closer, eyes steady. I don't care about the building right now. Ethan stills. I care about you staying. The world narrows to that space between them. Why? Ethan asks. Lucas exhales like stepping off a cliff. Because somewhere between fighting over skylight angles and watching you fight for people no one else sees, I fell for you. There it is. No strategy, no leverage, just truth. Ethan's eyes shine, not surprised, just overwhelmed. You're terrifying, he says softly. Lucas frowns. That's not usually a compliment. You change things, Ethan replies. People, me, a breath. I don't want to walk away either. The tent flap bursts open. Legal team, urgent. We found something, one says, breathless. Archived design files from Daniel's previous firm. They spread documents across a folding table. Timestamped drafts, years older than Ethan's stolen concepts. Original foundation designs authored by another junior architect, one pushed out after raising authorship disputes. Daniel hadn't created anything, he curated theft. A pattern, documented. The injunction collapses before it reaches a judge. Daniel's leverage evaporates into evidence. Months later, steel rises. Glass reflects sky instead of replacing it. Preserved housing stands beside the center, not under it. Kids walk past the site fence after school, watching their future take shape. Ethan stands at the edge, hard hat slightly crooked. Lucas joins him. No cameras, no board, just wind and scaffolding. You know, Ethan says quietly, this is the first project I didn't have to compromise on. Lucas watches the structure breathe into existence. It's the first one I'm proud of for the right reasons. Their hands brush, then stay. No announcement, just a choice. Opening day. Light floods the atrium exactly the way Ethan drew it at 1:17 a.m. months ago. Music echoes without distortion. Voices overlap without clashing. The preserved street flows naturally into the building like it grew there. A little girl runs past them, laughing. It feels happy in here. Ethan smiles. Lucas watches him, not the building. Because he finally understands something that never fit into balance sheets. Empires impress people, but spaces, and love, are what hold. And this time, they built both. Epilogue. Love, like architecture, is something you maintain. The building ages well. That's how Ethan knows they succeeded. Not because of the awards, though those came. Not because urban planning journals call it a turning point in ethical development. Not even because architecture students sketch it in notebooks like it's something sacred. It's the where. Handprints near the glass doors from years of children pushing inside too fast. Cafe chairs always slightly out of place. Bulletin boards layered with community flyers, dance classes, language exchanges, lost dogs, found people. The stone steps outside have smoothed where neighbors sit every evening. It's not pristine, it's lived in, which is the highest compliment a building can earn. Lucas stands on the second-floor walkway, hands in his coat pockets, watching afternoon light spill through the atrium. He still runs Han Global. But the company feels different now. Fewer vanity towers, more public bids, projects that take longer, argue harder, and make less immediate profit, but somehow build more lasting value. The board resisted at first. Then the numbers did something unexpected. Community-driven projects reduced long-term legal disputes, increased public trust, attracted stable investment. Ethics, it turns out, scaled. Lucas doesn't say "I told you so." He just keeps approving the next one. Footsteps approach. "You're blocking my favorite light angle," Ethan says, mildly offended. Lucas shifts half an inch. Tragic. My villain arc continues. Ethan smiles, sketchbook tucked under his arm like always. Some habits never leave. They don't work on every project together. They learned that early. Love needs space, not constant proximity. Collaboration is powerful. So is returning to each other with new stories instead of shared exhaustion. But they meet here often. Their first impossible collaboration. Their proof that neither of them had to become smaller to make room for the other. There are still hard days. Lucas still slips into control mode when pressure builds, voice sharp, shoulders tight, solving problems before anyone else speaks. Ethan still withdraws when overwhelmed, going quiet in ways that once meant disappearing. The difference now, they recognize it. "Hey," Ethan says gently when Lucas's jaw tightens during a tense funding call. "You're doing the steamroller thing." Lucas exhales, caught, right. And later, when Ethan goes silent after a difficult community hearing, Lucas doesn't push. Just sits beside him on the studio floor until the quiet softens instead of hardens. Love, they learned, isn't dramatic rescue. It's maintenance. One evening, they sit on the steps outside the center as the sky turns gold. Inside, someone practices violin. Notes drift through open doors, imperfect and beautiful. Kids run past them. A grandmother waves. A teenager argues loudly about dance rehearsal schedules. Life. Loud, messy, real. Lucas leans back on his hands. "Do you ever think about how close we came to not doing this project?" he asks. Ethan laughs softly. "You mean when I almost walked out? When your board tried to replace me? When my ex tried to sue us into the ground? All of it." Ethan looks at the building, then at Lucas. "Worth it, simple, certain." Later, when the interior lights click off one by one, they don't rush to leave. The empire, the career, the recognition. Those were never the foundation. This was. Two stubborn men, one shared vision, and a love built not on grand gestures, but on choosing each other again in small, ordinary moments. Lucas stands, offering his hand. Ethan takes it without looking. They walk home through a city that feels, for once, like something built to hold people, not impress them. And somewhere behind them, the building they fought for breathes quietly in the dark. Still standing, still full of light, just like the life they built inside it. The end. If you like the story, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notifications for more amazing stories.